Welcome back. The public can soon reimagine Singapore in 2030, bearing in mind the pandemic and prevailing trends. Now, the Institute of Policy Studies is conducting what's called a scenario planning project. It aims to engage Singaporeans on their future and help them contribute to the narrative. For more, we're joined by Professor Gillian Koh, Deputy Director of Research at IPS. Prof, thanks very much for joining us this evening. But first of all, tell us, why conduct the study now?
Well, as I say, the future is not what it used to be. So as you mentioned, we're facing, the global COVID-19 pandemic that's tested governance and resilience across many countries. I think that's also layered upon many mega trends before that. As you recall, in 2019, we were all worried about the prospect or the specter of US and China trade wars, facing the prospect of lots of climate emergencies and the uncertainty from that. Not only that, I think we've been in Singapore discussing the issue of disruptive technological change and how that might reshape industry and cause a lot of worry about jobs, wages, and really wealth and welfare of citizens. So I think we in Singapore, in a world that faces a period of radical uncertainty. So IPS has decided that we should relook and reperceive the future of Singapore, given all these uncertainties, megatrends outside of Singapore, which will have implications for Singapore, and changes within Singapore, also reshaping what we imagine Singapore in 2030 might be like.
Talk to us a little bit more about those impacts, Professor Koh, because part of the aim is to redefine, the ideas of resilience, social solidarity, and new opportunities through what IPS is doing. So how have these concepts been deeply impacted by COVID-19?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we look at all those trends I talked about, I haven't even begun to talk about the emerging trends, which we don't really understand. So the key thing is, as we gather pathfinders, experts, leaders in different fields, as well as citizens who are living the trends that are coming on board, then what we do is we actually challenge our assumptions about the future. We talk to one another about the different ways that life could play out in Singapore over the next decade. And as we do that, we reperceive together, and then our minds are stretched to consider different scenarios of Singapore. And then as we do that, we are prepared differently. We are prepared more kind of in a multi-dimensional way. And when we are prepared, we can be resilient because we're putting in place ways to, as you say, maximize the upside of change and mitigate or minimize the downside of the threats of change, and that way build resilience. And as we do that, we also try and figure out whether we'll be able to pull together as we face the threats, but also try to make best use of the silver lining under the dark clouds. And so the question will be whether we can pull together or will fragment. And that leads to the concept of social solidarity. So I think this is a process we get ready for the future when we see different alternative scenarios of the future, and that causes us to be resilient and more determined to pull together to maximize the upside of that uncertainty.
Yeah, Prof. Speaking of different scenarios, IPS is developing an online tool to help people contribute and to canvas ideas. You aim to reach more than 20,000 people. Tell us more about the tool. It's quite interactive, I gather.
Yes, absolutely. This is something that you'll be able to see online, maybe on your phone or an internet browser, on a tablet. And basically, there'll be content put on there after we've done serious thinking about the various trends that might play out in various sectors or domains. So what happens is, firstly, it's a system that highlights the interdependence of the different issues that will shape Singapore. So the user goes on there and he or she makes different choices on the different issue areas. So that's the interdependence. Change in one area will bring change in various other areas. But also it's interactive in the sense that you engage on the online tool. You will see that when you change things, things in other areas will change. You will also be able to finally, when you land, create a certain world of Singapore in 2030 and send that to a friend and invite a friend to also view what you have created and get them to create their world of Singapore 2030. Finally, we're also probably going to try and design the system so that as you, as a user, go through it, you may also add onto the system issues you think will be critical in shaping Singapore 2030. So that's the interaction. The final one, in addition to the interdependency of different issues, the interaction is insight. So what we are doing on the IPS side is to collect anonymized data of how users, Singaporeans, are responding or want to approach Singapore of 2030. And with the insights, we'll be able to throw that back to policymakers, to leaders across all domains in Singapore, to think about how best to plan their programs, their policies, to get ready for Singapore of 2030, taking on board the views of Singaporean users to this tool.
Yeah, it's almost like a choose your own adventure book that I grew up with. Prof, thanks
Absolutely.
very much for thanks very much for speaking with us. It's been such a pleasure talking to you again. We've been speaking there with Professor Gillian Koh,
Likewise.
Deputy
Thank you so
Director
much.
of Research and Senior Research Fellow at the Institute of Policy Studies.